Not long ago, a Nova Scotia fisherman snagged from the bottom a clue that could help solve the mystery of a shipwreck from 1844. The fisherman knew the wood was old. The worn copper fastening showed him that. So we brought it to the Shipwreck search team, which locates, protects, and preserves historically significant treasures of the deep. The search team has been encouraging Nova Scotia fishermen to help find and preserve underwater wrecks. Because of the age and where the fishermen snagged the piece of wood, John Davis of the search team believes it's from a wreck the team has long been searching for.
The interesting thing is that the fishermen snagged it right here, right off Country Harbour.
Country Harbour is on Nova Scotia's eastern shore, a coastline about as ragged as torn cloth. Hundreds of islands protect this shore from the savage pounding of the North Atlantic. It's a dangerous coast. For centuries, sailing ships and steamers, escaping storms at sea or lost in fog, ripped their bellies on the rocks along this coast and went straight to the bottom. Strangely, for the dozen or so known shipwrecks off Country Harbour, none are as old as this length of split timber, except this one, the Saladin, a blood-running bark of oak and mast pine that went to the bottom off Country Harbour in 1844. A wreck long believed lost to history, a wreck with a black and bloody tail. The search team believes the piece of wood is from the Saladin, and they hope the experts at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic in Halifax will confirm it.
It's amazing how many artifacts like this piece of wood come to the museum from a variety of sources. Quite often fishermen and so on who take these up in their nets. So the kinds of things that the museum has in its collection associated with the Saladin are artifacts that came to the museum from a variety of sources, most often relatives or descendants of relatives of people who were actually on the Saladin or associated with the case itself at that time. And those are the kinds of things that we have here, including Captain Mackenzie's smoking hat, the peach nut basket, a few other items like there's a Bible from the Saladin. But again, they come to us with oral tradition or oral history associated with them that connects them to the family and that family association with the wreck itself.
My job as a curator of special places is to basically protect this resource so that it's there for the longer term. If we can get people in the water at that site looking around, they may well find some other clues. They may find some other evidence which would help us tie the actual wreckage on the bottom to a particular vessel.
Jim Johnson, a member of the search team, knows the tale. He's a shipwreck historian. He's been searching for the Saladin for more than a dozen years.
We know where the ship went aground on the point in 1844. The piece of wood brought up by the fishermen suggests it might be a piece of wood from that period of ship. We also know that the point of land where the Saladin went aground, there are no other ships that we're aware of that went up there. So this easily could be a piece of the Saladin.
But is this actually a piece of the shipwrecked Saladin? And if so, how much of the wrecked ship is still below? Side-scan sonar bounces sound waves off the seabed, then interprets the soundings into the shape of what lies on the bottom. It searches a swath about 100 meters on either side of the boat. If a shipwreck has height, it will show as a perfect shadow of itself. However, if a shipwreck settled between two rocky ledges, it would be nearly impossible to identify with side-scan sonar. The same thing goes for a ship that settled deep into a silty bottom. That, too, would be nearly impossible to identify. The flat lines show a mud or silty bottom, while the larger, deeper shadows show underwater rocky ledges. This latest sonar sweep identifies several targets.
Shipwreck hunting is a process of elimination. Sometimes you can be very lucky and you can drop right onto a site. That's the rarity. In most instances, you're looking for months, and in some instances, even years. Months of searching, however, cost a substantial amount of money, and shipwreck searching requires lots of funding. Your funding will determine how many days you have on the site. It will determine what types of equipment you can use, whether you can bring in the side scan sonar and the magnometers. The funding that we have available for the Saladin is limited, but our research indicates that we are close. In fact, we're very close on this one. If the Saladin is down there, we will find it.
A shadow on the sonar screen. Is it a shipwreck? A hull on the bottom? The Saladin? There's only one way to know for sure. Dive and find it. The years of research, the long nights trying to unweave, unwind, unravel the mystery of the Saladin have all come down to this day, this morning, this dive. If the Saladin is down there, that's a pestering if, a doubt that nags at the hope of the search team. If. One reason for that if is a local legend. It says that long ago the sea battered the Saladin to pieces. The sea gave that cursed ship a burial which suited its horrible crime. Only a well-planned search will tell for sure whether the Saladin lies on the bottom off Country Harbour. A mystery waiting to be discovered. A ship with a bloody past. Is it the Saladin? Others have searched for the wreck of the Saladin, and others have come away empty-handed. Shipwreck hunting is not easy. On February 8, 1844, the Saladin, a 550-ton bark, sailed out of Valparaiso, Chile, for London, England. It carried a cargo of guano and 20 tons of copper. In her run, that part of the ship's hold that narrows toward the stern, the Saladin also carried 13 bars of silver. It was a beautiful ship, one of the finest of its kind to break the stocks at Newcastle, England. It was built for cargo and passengers, with staterooms fitted with mahogany and hand-rubbed oak. Above the poop deck hung a hand-carved face of a Turk. Sandy Mackenzie was captain. He was a hard-weather, heavy-drinking, foul-mouthed sailor, quick to curse his crew and clip a backhand to anyone for anything which didn't please him. He ran a tight ship, and most of his 11-member crew disliked him for it. There were 2 passengers on board the Saladin as well, Captain George Fielding and his 14-year-old son. Fielding was a desperate man who had lost his own ship to the Peruvian government for smuggling. He was on his way back to England to face the owners.
Damn you, Fielding! I give orders on this ship!
To hell with your orders, and to hell with you!
Almost at once, Captain Mackenzie and Fielding were at each other's throat. Fielding hated Mackenzie for what Mackenzie possessed and what Fielding had recently lost. A ship. By the time the Saladin rounded the Horn, Fielding had learned of the silver bars stowed in the run. Now his hate stirred with greed.
Fielding come to me and tell me what he had said about his quarrels with Captain Mackenzie, and then talked of the amount of money on board and what a fine prize a pirate would make of them.
While I was cook, I had this plot made up to me by George Jones. He told me what he and Captain Fielding had made up between them, and the best thing I could do was to go on their side for my own safety. The plot, he told me, was to kill the mate, then the captain, and after that the carpenter, then the men forward. I made him no answer.
By the time the Saladin crossed the equator in early April 1844, George Fielding had enlisted 2 others to join his plot. Besides Jones and Travaskis, Charles Anderson and John Hazelton had agreed to take the ship. Early Sunday morning, April 15, 1844, after a wild argument with Mackenzie the previous night, George Fielding and his mates committed mutiny.
Captain Fielding had an axe, Travaskis had an axe, Jones had an axe and a knife, I had a carpenter's claw hammer. There was an axe standing at the poop ready for Hazelton when he should leave the wheel.
That night, there was more madness, more savagery than in the dark circles of hell.
The mate was first killed. He was lying on deck. Travascus, the red-haired man, struck the mate first.
Then the carpenter was called up, and Charles Anderson struck him with a broad axe over the head. Hazelton and I and Anderson then threw the carpenter overboard. He was not dead, and he sang out murder. Then Charles Anderson got over the scuttle of the captain's cabin with the broad axe, waiting for the captain to come up.
Before dawn, Fielding and his men had murdered Captain Mackenzie and 5 crew. 2 others, William Carr, the cook, and John Galloway, cabin boy, had slept through it all. When these 2 finally woke and turned out for duty, the violence and bloodlust had played itself out. They let Carr and Galloway live.
Not a word. Swear it.
After the killing was done, Fielding changed course for Newfoundland, following the Gulf Stream from Cape Hatteras and along the coast of Nova Scotia. As he guided the ship, Fielding plotted with his son for the murder of the others. He wanted the ship and the silver all for himself. Fielding hid 2 pistols under the cabin table to do the killing.
2 or 3 days afterwards, Travascus discovered a pair of pistols under the cabin table. He went on deck to tell Hazelton. While they were on deck, Fielding proposed to me to kill them. I told Hazelton and Travascus what Fielding had said. They tied Fielding fast hand and foot till next day, when Galloway, Carr, and Jones threw Fielding and his son overboard.
With Fielding gone, the Saladin had no one to navigate. On May 22nd, 1844, the Saladin ran hard on the small island at Country Harbour, at a place now called Saladin Point. A nearby schooner, the Billow, came to rescue. Her captain boarded the Saladin, saw the disorder, the blood on the deck, the ship's figurehead repainted to hide her identity. He suspected mutiny and murder. He had the Saladin crew arrested and the cargo unloaded. The search is methodical. The search area has been divided into quadrants. The divers search each quadrant thoroughly, navigating by compass and by the physical characteristics of the underwater scape. A storm a few days ago has stirred up the bottom. The water is silty, visibility poor. The search goes slow. Methodically searching, eliminating one patch of sea bottom after the next, and time running out. Funding near exhausted. Months of research, years of hope riding on the final dive of this expedition. Maybe local legend was right, that on July 30th, 1844, the day the Saladin pirates were hanged on the South Common of Halifax, a windy sea howled and swelled and battered that cursed ship to pieces. Legend says nothing was left of the Saladin but the memory of its wickedness and 13 bars of silver. For the shipwreck search team, all the effort, the months scanning the coastline on this eastern shore of Nova Scotia, the money spent searching, the ups and downs of emotion, all of it have come down to this disappointment.
Tim, did you find anything?
We never found a thing. Nothing down there at all. We didn't find it.
The Saladin remains a mystery. But the disappointment won't last for long. In their search for the Saladin, the team discovers another wreck. A wreck whose tragic story is strangely woven with a storm at sea, a bonfire on a cliff, and a ruthless gang of shore pirates. There are nearly 5,000 known shipwrecks off the coast of Nova Scotia. 5,000 shipwrecks. And still, it takes a whole lot of research, funding, and luck to find any one of them, even when you know where the ship went down. Like the Saladin, sometimes the search team could hunt for a wreck for months, years, without finding it. But sometimes the team gets lucky and finds what it was looking for. This time, however, the search team gets extra lucky and finds what it was not looking for. During its search for the Saladin, the team sounds something on the bottom, which, by its shape and size, looks very much like a wreck. Positively identifying a shipwreck often requires information from two sources: a paper chase through archives and historical records, and an investigative dive. Sometimes the investigative dive is all that's needed to identify a shipwreck. Discovering a ship's nameplate or bell is the best ID anyone could make. However, if scavengers, salvors, or unscrupulous private collectors stumbled on a wreck in years past, the nameplate, bell, and figurehead are usually the first souvenirs to go. That's why historical documentation is so important. The paper chase will document the physical characteristics of those ships known to have sunk where the wreck was found. Discover, document, preserve. The Shipwreck Search Program does for shipwrecks what has long been done for historical ruins, buildings, battlefields, and monuments. It preserves the past and shares it with the world as living history. The benefits are educational, cultural, and financial.
Shipwreck sites 30 years ago only had one value, and that value was simply what could be scavenged or salvaged off the sites, what piece of brass could be brought up and sold as scrap, etc., etc. Today, what the coastal communities are discovering is if they protect and preserve these sites and use them in a sustainable way, they can bring divers in from all over the world who can experience them year after year.
For nearly 300 years, ships have sailed the sea lanes past this eastern shore of Nova Scotia, trading with Europe, America, and the Caribbean. Ship captains knew this ragged coast as well as any. They knew Country Harbour offered safe refuge from bad weather at sea. Shore pirates knew it too. They knew ships loaded to the gunwales with cargo would sail to Country Harbour to escape storms and thick fog. These ruthless gangs built bonfires on the cliffs, false beacons to draw storm-battered ships onto the treacherous reefs and shoals at the mouth of the harbor. Then the shore pirates looted the reefed ship of its cargo, sometimes waiting for crew and passengers to escape safely to the beach, sometimes not. Is this what lies on the bottom off Country Harbour? A helpless ship which had been lured on a reef by a cunning, cutthroat gang of shore pirates? Satellite navigation is important for protecting the integrity of the wreck site.
That's the wreck here.
If the team marks the wreck with a buoy, scavengers could easily find it. But with satellite navigation, the team is able to come and go, and nobody knows. Wreck diving is dangerous diving. Entering an enclosed space underwater, closing off direct access to the surface poses a real threat for a diver. Besides, a wreck has sharp edges which could tear hoses or gash flesh. Wrecks are often unstable and restrictive for safe movement, and they're usually deep. Deep enough for a diver to experience narcosis, a sort of insensible state when judgment becomes impaired. A wreck is no place for carelessness. Strange how the mind plays with the puzzle of bent and twisted metal. A wreck on the bottom, a bone of what it once was. Strange how a diver's imagination rivets sheets of wrought iron over that bow of iron ribs, how it hammers deck planks in place and stokes a fire in the furnace. This was an old-time steamer, a coal burner, a smoker, chugging the high sea, belching steam from her pot-belly boilers. No nameplate, no ship's bell. Probably scavenged years ago. Still, there's no doubt. This is the Finchley. London-built, London-launched, London-owned. The Finchley was a late 19th century steam and sail ship, a new class of vessel, a sort of hybrid caught in the crossover from wind power to coal-fired. It was a big ship, a freighter, 1,265 tons, and built in 1881. The Finchley left Savannah, Georgia, late September 1884. It was bound for England by way of Nova Scotia. It meant to stop at Sydney, Cape Breton, where, before the ocean crossing, the steamer would load bunker coal for burning in its big triple expansion steam engine. The Finchley's captain was a man named Garson from South Carolina. He knew the coast well enough, and the weather. For East Coast sailors, September is the cruelest month. Tropical storms gather along the equator, then track north, raising hell along the coast with a constant batch of high winds and churning sea. It was just such a storm that drove the Finchley to seek refuge in Country Harbour. That was on the 29th of September, 1884, the feast day of St. Michael the Archangel, the guardian of the gates of heaven. And that night, more than 100 years ago, for the Finchley, it seems the gates of heaven were closed. In the rain-blind night, Captain Garson guessed wrong when he drove the Finchley on the southeast ledge of the breakwater of Country Harbour. Or did a bonfire on the cliff, a false beacon set by shore pirates, guide him onto that shoal? That's where the shore pirates would want the ship, hung on a shoal like dressed meat, easy to get to, easy to pick over and loot. But Captain Garson changed all that. He did what he never should have done, what shore pirates never would have expected him to do.
God damn it, she's backing off!
Captain Garson reversed engines and drew the Finchley off the shoal. Those watching on the cliff saw the steamer cough black smoke and list and sag from taking water through a hole punched in the bow. To save his ship, Garson made a desperate run for the beach and soft mud. But in the froth and spume and sea-swelling center, the Finchley struck another ledge of granite teeth and went down in 28 meters of water. For more than a century, the wreck of the Finchley has rested on the bottom off Country Harbour. And now, with the search team's discovery and preservation of that century-old vessel, the Finchley will become an underwater museum, a treasure made valuable by being under the sea.